I had the same routine for 103 mornings. On the 104th, he broke it. Before first light, I would climb the cold stair to the king's tower, lift the iron latch that always bit my palm, and slip into the dark of his chamber to wake the most dangerous wolf alive. I would say the words I had been given. "The day is risen, my lord. The hall is waiting." And I would watch him surface out of sleep, like a man hauled up from deep water. And then I would slip out again before he was awake enough to fix his eyes on me. In and out before he knew my face. That was the arrangement. I had made my peace with it the way you make peace with weather. I was 20 that winter, a woman grown by any pack's reckoning, old enough to have refused the duty, and clever enough not to. No one wanted the dawn waking. The other maids spoke of it the way they spoke of the deep wood. Voices low, eyes turned elsewhere.
3 girls before me had taken the tower stair, and then, one by one, stopped appearing in the kitchens, and no one would say where they had gone, and I had learned not to ask. I took the duty because it was mine to take or else go hungry, and because I have always preferred a danger I can see the shape of to one I cannot. So, 103 mornings. The latch, the dark, the words, the surfacing, the quiet leaving. On the 104th, I lifted the latch, and the king was already awake. He sat upright in the grey dark with his back against the carved headboard and his eyes on the door. On me, as though he had been watching that exact patch of black for a long time, waiting for it to open and become a person. I stopped on the threshold with the words half up my throat and could not get them out. He looked at me the way no one had looked at me in that castle in 4 months, as though my arrival had been the entire point of the night.
"You called me back," he said. 4 words. I did not know what they meant. I would spend a long time finding out. I dropped into the bow I owed him and aimed for the door. "Forgive me, my lord. I will return when you have need of waking." "Stay." I did not stay. A maid who learns the castle learns first which commands are real and which are a man talking to the dark, and I told myself this was the second kind. But at the turn of the stair, I let myself look back, and he had not moved, and he was still watching the door I had just pulled shut, and I understood that he had wanted me to leave it open. The thing you must understand about Eric of the Iron Territories is that he was not a cold man. The court had decided he was, because cold is the simplest story to tell about a king who does not smile. But I had been watching him surface from sleep for 1/3 of a year, and you cannot fake the face a man makes when he is glad to be alive. He made it every morning, for 1 breath, before the king came back into him.
I was the only soul in that fortress who saw it, and I had assumed it meant nothing, because I had assumed I was furniture, and furniture does not get told to stay. For 3 mornings after, he was awake when I came. He never spoke again past a nod, but the candle by his bed, the one I lit each dawn out of habit, the small, unimportant ritual no one had ordered, was already burning when I arrived, as though he had lit it himself so I would have 1 less reason to come close, and 1 more reason to come at all. And the door. He took to leaving the door ajar after I left, so that on the stair I would hear no latch fall behind me. I told myself a great many sensible things about that door. I believed none of them by the end of the week. It was Lady Sigrun who taught me to be afraid. She found me on the servants' stair the morning of the 4th day, which a lady has no business doing, and she was beautiful, in the way of a sword laid out on velvet, admired, and never far from blood. The whole castle knew her station.
The late king had chosen her for his son before either was old enough to object, and she had spent the years since being almost the Luna, a queen in waiting, whose waiting had gone on a little too long to be comfortable. "You are the Dawn Girl," she said. It was not a question. "He is awake when you come now. I have heard." "He sleeps poorly, my lady. I would not read more into it than that." "No." She studied me, the way you study a stain to decide whether it will lift. "You would not. That is precisely the kind of girl he requires." She let that sit, and then she smiled, and the smile was the coldest thing in a castle full of cold things. "Do enjoy the tower while it is yours. These postings change with the weather." I did not understand the threat. I understood only that it was one, and that she had made it with the ease of a woman who had made it stick before. 3 times, to 3 girls who no longer came down to the kitchens. I should have run. Instead, I climbed the tower the next morning with a single question riding in my throat like a stone. And when the king surfaced and his eyes found me in the candlelight, I asked it before sense could stop me. "My lord, what did you mean? You called me back. Back from where?" He went very still. Out the east window the sky was the colour of old iron, not yet light. He looked at it a long moment, and then he looked at me. And for the space of one held breath, he was not a king deciding what a servant might be told. He was only a tired man deciding whether to be alone with a thing or not.
"From the grey hour," he said. "Do you know what your voice does, Dawn Girl, or have they truly told you nothing?" "They told me to say the day is risen and to leave before you woke." A sound came out of him, low and broken in the middle, that I realised after a moment had been a laugh. The first I had heard from him, and it cost him something. "Of course they did," he said. "Of course that is what they told you." He did not finish it. He looked back at the window where the light was not yet, and his hands had gone tight on the edge of the carved frame, and whatever he had nearly said, he folded back up and put away. And I knew the audience was over. "Go down," he told me, "before the others wake and wonder why the Dawn Girl lingers." But at the door he said my name. Bryn. Which I had never given him, which meant he had gone and learned it. And a king does not learn the name of furniture. After that morning, the wakings changed, though I could not have named the hour it happened.
I still climbed the stair before light. I still lit the candle, but I had stopped reciting, "The day is risen," the way you recite a thing you no longer hear, and started, without ever deciding to, simply telling him, the castle, that the well had frozen and the boys were melting snow for the kitchens, that the old grey mare had foaled in the night, and the foal had legs like a folding stool and no notion what to do with them, that the cook had burned the bread again. The cook burned the bread most mornings. It had become, between us, a kind of weather report. He listened. That was the thing I could not get used to. The most dangerous wolf alive would surface out of the dark and lie still and listen to a maid account for a foal as though the foal were a matter of state. And some mornings he would ask a question. Only one. Always one, as though he had rationed himself. And the question was never about the kingdom. "Did it stand?" he asked one morning. "The foal?" "Not yet. It is deeply offended by the entire arrangement." "Tell me when it stands." "You could come and watch it stand yourself, my lord. It is your foal. It is your stable." The silence after that had a particular shape. "I do not go down at dawn," he said at last, and did not say why. And I did not yet know that the why was the grey hour, that a man held to the world by a single voice does not stray far from the place that voice will come to find him. I thought he was only proud. Another morning, I told him the smith's wife had been brought to bed of twins, and both had lived. And he was quiet a long while. "You bring me the small things," he said, "the foal, the bread, the twins. Why?" "Because no one else brings a king the small things, my lord. They bring you grain tithes and border raids, and which house has insulted which? I thought you might care to know the smith has 2 sons this morning who did not exist yesterday. The world is mostly small things. A man could forget, up here in a tower, that it is out there at all." He looked at me as though I had spoken in a tongue he had not heard since he was a boy. "Yes," he said after a time. "He could." He did not explain it, and I did not ask. And I went down the stair with the sense that I had laid my hand, in the dark, on the very edge of whatever it was that made the king of the Iron Territories need waking at all. He never closed the distance. He had a way of standing a clear pace off when half a pace would have done, a hand resting on the bed frame when it might have reached, a door left open instead of a hand offered.
Once, when I crouched to gather the gutted candle stub and my fingers had gone clumsy with the cold, he started to reach to help me, and then did not. He drew the hand back to the frame and let me manage it alone. And the not reaching sat in that room, louder than any reaching could have been. I had been attended to, I came to understand, more completely by a man who never once reached for me than by any man who had reached for nothing else. The court noticed before I did. The court always notices first. It has nothing else to occupy it. It happened at a hall gathering, some matter of grain tithes, the great hall full of ranked wolves, and the king on his throne, looking carved from the same stone as the chair. I came in at the servant's door, with a jug for the high table, the lowest errand in the room, the kind that makes a person into furniture. And the king of the Iron Territories, in the middle of a sentence, in front of his entire court, went still and turned his head toward the servant's door in the precise instant I stepped through it. Turned toward me the way a needle turns north, before he had any way of knowing it was me and not some other maid with some other jug. He caught himself. He turned back to the tithes. But the whole high table had seen the king's head come round for a maid with a wine jug, and I watched the noticing travel down the hall like a draught beneath a door, and I poured at the high table with hands that had decided, on their own, to be perfectly steady, because I would not hand the room the satisfaction of watching them shake. Lady Sigrun saw it too. She was seated at the king's right hand, where she had sat for years, and she watched the most powerful wolf in the north swing toward the servants' entrance like a compass needle, and I saw her do the arithmetic, and I saw her arrive at a sum she did not like at all. I lay awake that night doing sums of my own. A maid who is noticed by a king is not lifted by it. She is spent by it, and set down again. And the castle had a tidy phrase for what became of the girls he had looked at a moment too long. I told myself the sensible thing, that in the morning I would recite the cold formula again, keep my eyes on the floor, become furniture, before the noticing could harden into a thing with my name carved into it.
I climbed the stair the next morning and lit the candle and told him the well had thawed and the foal had tried its legs once more and gone down on the second. And I recited not one word of the formula, because it turned out I was not, after all, a woman who could make herself smaller in order to be safe. I had taken the dawn duty because I preferred a danger I could see the shape of. I was beginning to suspect I had walked the whole way into one I could not. If you have come with me this far up the cold stair, stay to the top. What I found in the steward's ledger the next night is the thing I have never told a living soul. And I find, telling it now, that I would like to be believed. If hers is a voice you would keep on a long night, you know the small kindness the bell below is asking for. Now, the ledger, and what it cost me to read it. I found it because I went looking, and I went looking because a man who laughs like that is hiding something worth the laugh.
The steward kept his rolls in a low room off the kitchens, and a maid with a candle has reason to be anywhere there is a draught. I found the waking rota on the third shelf, a ledger gone soft at the corners with handling, and I opened it expecting a list of chores, and found a graveyard. Names, pages of them, going back further than the oldest living servant. The waker of the king dated and ruled in columns, each name kept for a season or a year, and then struck through with a single line and a date and one of two notations in the margin. Released, said some. The rest said only, failed. The 3 girls before me were there. Failed all 3, within the last 2 years, the dates falling closer and closer together, like a heart giving out. And there was a write, pasted to the inside cover in a hand older than the ledger, the true words. 3 verses of the old tongue meant to be recited at the threshold of the king's chamber in the grey hour, to call his wolf back across it before the light came, because his bloodline had sworn a debt to the deep wood, generations gone, and every night the debt came collecting, and a recited rite at the door was the toll that had always paid it down. The day is risen, the hall is waiting, was not the rite. It was a kindness, or a cruelty, a soft little nothing they had handed the dawn girls, so that the failures, when they failed, would not know what they had failed at. The girls before me had been taught the same useless words I had. The rite itself had been failing for years. The debt had grown teeth the old verses could no longer file down, because Eric was the strongest wolf his line had ever made, and the strong ones the wood wants most.
At the bottom of the last page, in a newer hand, his hand, I knew it from the order he signed each morning, was a single entry that was not struck through. Bryn. And beside it, no notation of released or failed, only 3 words. She does not recite. I sat down on the cold floor of the steward's room and understood, all at once and far too late, what I had been doing on 103 mornings. I had never learned the rite. I had stood in his doorway and forgotten the stiff little phrase within a fortnight, and started instead simply telling him things, that it was morning, that there was frost on the glass, that the cook had burned the bread again, talking to him the way you talk to a person, and not the way you address a debt. And his wolf, which would not answer a recited toll, had turned toward a voice that spoke to him as though he were worth waking for his own sake. You called me back, not from sleep, from the wood, from the place 3 girls had failed to reach him. I had been hauling the king of the Iron Territories back across his own threshold every dawn for 1/3 of a year, and no one had told me, because the people who managed the rota did not want the dawn girl to know she was the only thread holding him to the world. I thought of Lady Sigrun on the stair. These postings change with the weather. I thought of who would profit from controlling which voice called the king back each morning, and I stopped being afraid of her in the small way, and started being afraid of her in the large one. I was right to. She moved against me within the week. It was done cleanly, the way she did everything. A word to the steward, a notation in the rota, and on the 111th morning, a different maid climbed the tower stair while I was turned away at the kitchen door and told my duties had been reassigned, the king's household having decided a more seemly arrangement was wanted.
I stood in the kitchen with my hands full of someone else's task and watched the east window go from iron to grey to the first thin gold of light, and I waited for the bell that would mean the king had risen. No bell came. What came instead, an hour past full light, was the Beta Ronin taking the tower stair 3 at a time, and the door at the top opening on a stillness that the whole castle could feel through the stones. The particular silence of a room where someone has not come back. The substitute maid had recited "The day is risen" perfectly. She had said it to a man who was no longer entirely in the room to hear it. The grey hour had come and gone with the wrong voice at the door, and Eric had very nearly not returned at all. He returned. Barely. They would not let me up, but I heard it from Ronan later, white-faced, that the king had surfaced near midday, like a drowned man brought back on the 3rd try, that he had not been able to say his own name for an hour, that the first word out of him once he could speak again had been a question, and the question had been, "Where is she?" That was the morning the court learned the Dawn Girl was not furniture. He came down himself the next day, which kings do not do, into the kitchens, in front of the cook and the scullions and Lady Sigrun, who had arranged to be present in the way she always arranged to be present. He found me at the long table, and the whole room went down into bows, and I did not, because I could not get my knees to remember how. And so I was the only one standing when the king of the Iron Territories crossed his own kitchen to a maid and stopped 1 pace away. "You will resume the dawn duty," he said.
His voice was for the room. His eyes were only for me. "By my order, above any household arrangement, above any objection." A breath. "I will hear no argument on the matter, from any rank." It was the "from any rank" that did it. Everyone in that kitchen knew at whom it was aimed. A king had just set a kitchen maid above the woman his own father had chosen to be his queen, in the open, with the alliance her bloodline carried hanging in the balance, and he had done it without a flicker, as though the cost were nothing he had not already decided to pay. Lady Sigrun's face did a great deal of work to remain lovely. "My lord is generous to his servants," she said. "My lord is keeping himself alive," he answered, and let her make of that what she would, and turned and left. I should tell you it felt like triumph. It did not. It felt like a target being painted on my back in a colour everyone could see.
I cornered Ronan that night and made him tell me the rest, because half a secret is worse than none. The debt, the wood, the grey hour. He confirmed all of it, and added the part the ledger had not, that the household had known for 2 years that the right was failing, and had simply kept feeding dawn girls to the threshold one after another, hoping a young, strong voice might hold where the old words could not, and counting the failures as the cost of doing business. 3 girls. The wood had not been gentle with them.
"And no one thought," I said, "to tell the next girl what she was walking into." Ronan would not meet my eyes. "The ones who knew it was real did not come back up the stair," he said. "The ones who did not know held. Fear breaks the voice. We needed voices that did not shake. He had the grace to look ill saying it. He did not know how it was being managed. When he learnt, last week, what they had been doing in his name, he near tore the steward's room apart with his hands. So that was the laugh on the tower. Of course that is what they told you. He had found out, the same week I had, that the woman calling him back from the wood every dawn had been doing it blind, fed to the threshold like the three before her. Never told she was the only thing standing between him and the deep dark. He had been awake when I came, not to command me, not even, at first, out of feeling. He had been awake because he could not stand to be unconscious for the one act that another person was risking herself to perform on his behalf, without knowing the stakes. He had stayed awake to keep watch over the woman keeping watch over him. I went up the next morning and told him I knew. All of it. The right, the wood, the ledger, my own name unstruck at the bottom of the page. He took it in silence, sitting up in the grey dark with the candle he had lit himself between us. When he spoke, his voice had nothing of the king in it. "Then you know I have no right to ask you to keep climbing that stair," he said. "You owe me nothing, Bryn, not your mornings, not your voice, not your life thrown across a threshold for a debt my grandfather swore and I inherited. 3 women paid for my blood already. I will not have a 4th, and I will not have you think you are bound to it." His hands were tight on the bed frame again, the way they went when the truth was costing him. "My wolf chose your voice without asking me. I have been trying to catch up to him ever since, and failing, and the failing is mine to carry. Go down. Go home if you have one. I will face the grey hour as my line was always meant to, alone." It was, I think, the most honest thing anyone had ever offered me. A door held open, with no hand pulling me through it. "And if I leave?" I asked. "What happens to you in the grey hour tomorrow?" He did not answer. Which was the answer. I have been called many things since that morning. Stubborn is the kindest. I crossed the cold floor, and I picked up the candle, and I set it where it always went, and I said, "Then it seems I am still the Dawn Girl." And I watched the most dangerous wolf alive lose, very quietly, an argument with a kitchen maid, and not mind losing it, which was new for him, and which the part of me that had decided long ago not to hope felt anyway. A small, warm, reckless thing I did not have the sense to put out. We had perhaps a fortnight of mornings after that, and they were not the months that came before them, because now we both knew what the mornings were for. He no longer pretended the candle had lit itself. I no longer pretended I had not read my own name, unstruck, at the foot of a graveyard of names. He still kept his pace of distance, but now I understood it was not pride, and not even restraint. It was a man refusing to let a single part of this be owed.
He would not close a hand around a woman who had not yet, freely, with the whole cost laid out in front of her, decided to climb the stair anyway. So I climbed it anyway, every dawn, with the whole cost laid out in front of me. That was the only answer he would take, and the only one I cared to give. Lady Seagrin, meanwhile, had reached the same conclusion I had, and drawn the opposite plan from it. If the king could be held to the world by a single chosen voice, then whoever held that voice held the king. She had failed to remove me, so she would replace me, not with another maid this time, but with herself. If she could be the one standing at the threshold the morning the grey hour took him deepest, if hers could be the voice that called him back, then the wolf might turn toward her instead, and the debt would make her indispensable. And indispensable is a single short step from queen.
She arranged it for the dark of the moon, when the grey hour runs longest and the wood pulls hardest. She had me locked in the larder. A bolt thrown from outside, a length of dark before dawn, and a lady sweeping up the tower stair in a maid's grey cloak with the right, the true right, the old verses which her family had helped keep for 3 generations, ready on her tongue. She had the words. She did not have the thing the words had stopped being able to do. I heard the bolt go, and I did not waste breath on the door. I went out the larder's coal hatch, which is a thing a lady would never think a queen to be might need to know about, and I came up the outside of the tower in the dark, with the iron cold enough to leave my hands raw, and the grey hour was already thick in the air, that wrongness that pours off the deep wood, when I reached his door. Lady Sigrun stood at the threshold reciting 3 verses, perfect, in a voice that did not shake. And Eric was not coming back.
I could see it from the door. He sat upright the way he always did, but his eyes were on nothing, fixed past her on a dark she could not follow him into. And the cold of the wood was crawling up the walls of his own chamber, frost spidering across the inside of the east window, where the light should have been, and was not yet. And the right fell off her perfect tongue, and into the room, and did nothing at all. It does not answer the words, I told her from the door. It never did. It answers being wanted for nothing in return. You have never wanted anything for nothing in your life. She turned, and for the first time since the servant's stare, her face was not lovely. Then call him, Dawn Girl, she said, stepping back from the threshold with a smile like the edge of the larder bolt. Call him, and let the whole court see a maid do what a lady could not. And let them remember it was I who gave you the chance. She thought it a trap.
She thought that if I crossed that threshold in the deep of the grey hour, with the debt this hungry and the light this far off, the wood would take me the way it had taken 3 girls already, and she would have her rival gone and her hands clean. She may have been right. I crossed it anyway. The cold came into me the moment I stood in the doorway. It came up through the iron latch I gripped to keep myself standing, and the latch bit my palm open the way it always had. Except this time, the blood ran warm down my wrist, and the cold tried to climb up after it, into my arm, into the centre of me. The deep wood reaching through the threshold for the voice that had been cheating it of its king for 1/3 of a year. It wanted me in his place. I understood that with a terrible clarity. Frost climbing my sleeve, the air going to glass in my lungs. 1 step back and the cold would let me go. I did not step back. Eric, I said. Not my lord, his name. The way you say a name to a person you have decided to keep. It's morning. There's frost on the glass. Your glass this time, not just the window. The cook burned the bread again. I could smell it from the larder she locked me in. The foal stood up on its own yesterday. All of it is happening here, without you, and it is duller than it has any right to be, and I am cold to the bone holding this door, and I am not letting it shut, and I am not leaving. So you are going to have to come back and put a stop to all of it yourself. For a moment, The longest of my life. Nothing. Then his eyes moved, found the door, found me, bleeding and frost-rimed in the threshold, refusing to fall.
And the glad face he made every morning for one breath before the king came back, the face I had thought meant nothing for 103 mornings, broke over him whole. And he came back across the threshold of his own self toward the only voice in the world his wolf had ever agreed to answer. And the cold went out of the room all at once, like a held breath finally let go. And the light, the real light, came gold across the frost on the east window and found the two of us alive in it. The debt broke that morning, and it broke for good. Because a debt of service has no purchase on a wolf who has freely given his anchor to another, and had it freely given back. The wood does not understand a thing chosen, it only understands a thing owed. We had stopped owing each other anything somewhere on those middle mornings, and started choosing, and that the wood could not hold. What the kiss was, I will tell you once, and then keep the rest.
He crossed the room and took my bleeding hand in both of his, as though it were the more wounded for the giving, and he bent his head to me, and in it was every morning he had spent awake, keeping watch over the woman keeping watch over him, finally allowed to mean what it had always meant. That is all. The rest is mine, and his, and the open doors. Lady Sigrun did not leave that tower a free woman. She had stood at the threshold and let the king go down into the grey hour, rather than fetch the only voice that could hold him, and the whole court learned of it before the frost had melted from the glass, because Ronan had followed her up the stair and seen the whole of it from the dark of the landing. A noblewoman may scheme for a crown. She may not nearly cost a king his life and his soul to the deep wood, and expect the north to forget it. Her family's alliance dissolved by the next moon.
She was sent to a holdfast far enough north that the wood there is a different wood entirely, and I have not troubled to learn how she fares in it. The fracture took longer to close than the debt did. A king who raises a kitchen maid over a lady of the old blood does not get a tidy court the next morning. There were houses that muttered, advisers who tallied the lost alliance and wondered if the king had been bewitched, old wolves who could not decide whether they had watched a love story or a scandal. Eric let them mutter. He had spent his whole reign caring what the north made of him, and had decided, somewhere in the grey hour, that he was finished spending himself on it. Let them say a maid bewitched me, he said once, watching the muttering houses from the tower window. She did. Every morning for a third of a year. I should like to be bewitched the rest of my life, if she can be persuaded to keep climbing the stair. She could be persuaded. It is half a year on now, and I am writing this from the tower, which has my weight worn into it the way the larder never did. They made me Luna in the great hall, before the same court that watched the king set me above a lady of the old blood, and I wore the title the way I once wore the dawn duty, because it was mine to take, and because I have always preferred a danger I can see the shape of. There is no rota any more, there is no right. There is only a door at the top of a cold stair that is never latched, between his chamber and mine, because he has not been able to bring himself to shut a door against me since the morning I would not let one shut against him. He still wakes before I come. I have caught him at it, sitting up in the grey dark with the candle already lit, watching the door, waiting for it to open and become me. He says he does it out of habit. I have stopped correcting him. A man is allowed to keep one small lie if it is a kind one, and the truth, which we both know, is louder than the lie anyway. He is awake because the best part of his day is the part where the door opens, and he would not miss it for the world he nearly lost. So tell me, Did you guess what the 4 words meant before I did, up there in the candlelight? Or did he keep you in the dark as long as he kept me? Stay a while in the comments and tell me where you are listening from tonight. I read every one of them by candlelight in a tower with the door left open. And if you want to know what comes next out of the Iron Territories, you know where the bell is. Ring it and stay. There is always another door, and I have learned to leave them open.